Hi, I've been asked to give my response to the article that came out in the New Yorker recently by Anna Russell called Why So Many People Are Going No Contact with Their Parents. And the reason I'm asked this is because my brand rests on, narcissistic parents and being highly empathic as a person. And I personally have not believed that the cutoff method, because my work is in generational healing, which is a step beyond generational trauma, I haven't believed that it really does anything. It doesn't deviate the system. It doesn't really pivot the system. All it does is it leaves the system. And there is something about that can create space for the functionality of a person who's had a target on their back in that system. But the reason I have primarily been one to say that the cutoff method isn't, when it comes to a family system, and this is the irony, like my own therapist would say, oh, I could cut off my parents, but never a partner. And the irony is that, well, they probably didn't have parents that trauma bonded with them. So when it comes to our parents, they are our God until the illusion of them being a demigod is shattered when we realize, oh, well, they don't know everything. So maybe they don't know anything. And that can be, especially if you were raised in a bubble, very shattering to a psyche. So I have primarily not believed for my own sense of self, and this is nothing to do with other people. I have no judgment about other people choosing their own path. But for my path, because I had a target on my back in my system, if I would reject this system, I felt like, and again, this is where everybody who's codependent goes, am I a narcissist, right? If I were to ever reject the system, I would be like the system. I would be a rejecter. And I never wanted to be a rejecter. I understood that a lot of my family's psychological hangups were based in rejection. So they just reject primarily. And I was always the kid going, please just let me love you. Like I can help you. I can save you. I had these ideas of I could be helpful if they would just let me. So I never wanted to reject them. And I still don't. So the request to speak on this, I normally actually don't read articles that long. I haven't had the time, but somebody sent it to me and she said, I'd love your response on this. And I'm grateful for it because let me just start here. So I can speak on this as a sandwiched generation. And I want to speak to the mothers who have been cut off, who are literally going, I don't understand what I did. There is that possibility. I think that people assume, oh, if you're a mother, and I see this some places, I try not to even venture into these places online, but I see people going, oh, if you were cut off by your child, you have to know what you did. And if you don't, that's the problem. No, that's not true. There's some children who are psychologically unsound, okay? And it's sad to be the mother who goes, wait, I thought I did everything right and I'm really confused. I literally don't know what I did. And if that child is not giving you an explanation, that is not on the parent. And I have something to say about this in the sense that the way I look at it is, and I'm going to get on this article, but one of the things that this guy says in the article is like toxic people are in the eye of the beholder, that somebody calling somebody else toxic is just an angry person. Well, no, I disagree with that actually. Toxic to me is poison. And in my generation, we were spoon-fed, and I'm not saying this is true now. There are parents like this now, but I'm just speaking to the zeitgeist of the times and what I'm seeing, this new version of, and I don't love it in my field that people push estrangement. I will always say the nuclear family is what I would advocate for, and if it is not working in that context, then you have no choice but to step out of it. But I think in this new phenomenon in psychology, it's like, oh, just estrange from your parents if you don't like them. And I think that's insane because that is going to breed a bunch more, like that's going to create narcissism. But the thing about this is, if you're a parent who's been cut off from a child and you genuinely don't know why, and you have tried to take responsibility, it's very likely that you've given them the gift of being self-agent enough to feel allowed to do that, in the sense that my generation would never even consider that because we've been trauma bonded. So the difference is if you're a person, let me get back to the toxic things. So I am not angry, but I am aware that for 40 years I've been spoon-fed poison and I've been told to smile and be grateful when I eat it, and it makes me sick. And I see this new generation of parents, we don't do that to our kids. So if your child left you and you're going, I dealt with 1,000 times more shit from my parents and I would never leave them, it's probably not that you did something wrong, it's probably that you did something right, because they don't feel responsible for you. They felt self-agent and safe enough to initiate in a world where you didn't exist. So true cult-like narcissistic families, that is so hard to break out of because you feel responsible because you're trauma bonded. And when that trauma bond, my mail's about to come, so my dog's about to go nuts. But that trauma bond makes somebody feel responsible to stop it. So again, you go, oh, I could save you. I could help you. I could make the abuse stop. Okay, leave it. I can make the abuse stop if you just let me. Like if you'd let me love you, I can make this abuse stop. So we grow up feeling ultimately responsible for our parents, whether that's emotionally, whether it's just to make it stop, whether it's to save them psychologically, whether it's to make them stop hitting us, whatever it is. We feel responsible to continue to seek their validation because we weren't given it. So this new generation of children that are choosing, and I'm not saying this is everybody, obviously, but I do see this uplift and like, well, I just disagreed with my mother's ideology, so I'm going to cut her off. But just because you disagree with somebody, like in this article, this woman was talking about how she was raised in a fundamental religion. And then when she went to college, her bubble burst and she realized like, whoa, my parents had me in a bubble and there's more outside of that bubble that I wasn't aware of. So maybe they were lying to me. And then she couldn't find acceptance with all of these new things that she began to accept about the outer world. And when she would bring these home to her parents would say, well, that's not us. We don't agree with that. So there's a clash in ideology. And the clash seems to be polarized, but that polarization, even though it is extremely different in expression, is the same. So this girl is saying, well, she got married and she wanted her parents to get vaccinated to come to her wedding. And when the mom was trying to meet in the middle and saying like, hey, can we come in a side door? Can we like do it a different way? Like, I don't want this forced medical thing on me just to be able to celebrate you. And the daughter was like, well, if you can't do that for me, then I'm cutting you off. But from what I could see, it was the parents who were actually trying to meet in the middle and say like, well, how can we work this out? And the daughter was like, it's all or nothing. Well, what does that say to you? Because the daughter then says, and I'm not shaming the daughter, this is your life, your path, but she says, well, my parents chose their ideology over me. Well, then you also choose your ideology over your parents. And that's why I never wanted to reject my parents, because I didn't want to be the same as them, because I understand that just because things express themselves differently doesn't mean they're any different at all. Like if I reject my parents, I am like them. And I don't want to be like that. And if I say, and I'm this girl, and I say, well, you don't want to do what I want to do, so you can't do anything I want to do, it's a very borderline way to live, because it's a very like, I put you on a pedestal, and now that you're not going to raise to my standards, now that I've dropped you, because that's what happens in parents. When they all of a sudden, they're your parents, and then they become people, and you're like, oh my God, how shocking, right? If you're a healthy person, you're going to grow up to see your parents as people, not parents, right? Because that's what they are first and foremost. So that label is going to kind of change. And I know that's a nuanced space to be in for people. And it can feel devastating because you lose your center, you lose your space of guidance. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I followed these people. And now if they're not going to follow me, then they can't be with me. So that clash in ideology, that's not my experience with estrangement, right? So what I'm seeing in this article is that if, like, this girl was given a gift. She was given the gift of being able to go to college, of being self-agent enough to say, you know what, I don't need you. She was given a gift of parents who were trying to meet her in the middle. And that is a different kind of life. It's a different kind of estrangement, because the new way of being is like there's not so much toxins. So imagine it like this. When you're allergic to something, the more you have, the shittier you feel. And when you're in a constantly toxic situation, truly toxic, where you have a target on your back, nothing you do is right, your whole family sits around and watches you take the hit, and it's literally your job to distract the person who's the most dysfunctional so that nobody else has to deal with their dysfunction. Like, you are responsible to deal with that person. When that is the case, and you're spoon-fed toxins, and you're positioned in the family system as the person who's just supposed to eat it, you do not understand how toxic you are. But if you're not that person, you just have parents who are like, disagree with you, but let you live your life. The tiny amounts, because you're clean on the inside, you've been gifted the clarity to stay in your own body, to embody your own psyche, to be clean, you notice, oh, I ate that thing, and that small amount made me feel like shit, I'm not going to do that again. That is what I see happening with this new generation of estranged people who go, well, you pissed me off, so I just, I can't tolerate the little amounts of toxins that you put in my body. And there's a sense of every body is going to trigger you at some point, right? Like, that's being human, that's being in relationships. The way to be in relationships with that mature awareness is to know how to repair with that awareness. So in what I realized the other day, I want to share two stories about this. So I was at an amusement park and I saw this woman. She was probably 45 and her daughter was probably 10. And I didn't put it all together until after I'm seeing this scene unfold. And nobody that came from a healthy family system would even probably notice what I was seeing. But the grandmother, who you could tell probably paid for this trip for them to be there. She wanted her own way. She was throwing a temper tantrum. She was probably 70 years old. The girl didn't want to do what the grandmother wanted. So the 10-year-old was throwing a temper tantrum. And here's this mom sandwiched in the middle. Hand raised here, right? So this isn't me. This isn't my story, but this is a story I've lived, and I watched this lady live it, and I saw that she couldn't see what she couldn't see while she's in it. So the grandmother is screaming down at this 10-year-old girl. She's probably 10, maybe she's 11 or 12. And the girl's frozen and just standing there looking down, and all of a sudden there's like tears pouring down her face. And the grandmother just keeps going. And you could tell that even when the girl was like, fine, I'll do what you want, the grandmother just insisted on shaming and poking. And the mom was standing there, this 45-year-old mom was standing there with her hands on her daughter's shoulders. And you could tell she didn't like the way that her daughter was being treated. You could tell that she didn't want it to be her daughter's normal. So she gasped when her mom finished her little rant, stomping her feet away. Her mom ran away like she's a 70-year-old throwing a temper tantrum. And the 45-year-old was like, Mom! And she, like, what do you do in that situation, right? Your 10-year-old is traumatized, shamed, sobbing in a crowd of people, frozen because of what your mother just did. But I could tell that to this 45-year-old woman, this was about not even 1/20th of what she experienced from her mother. So she's probably thinking, oh, well, at least she has me. I'm going to tend to this later because I'll tell her Grammy is like not being normal. This isn't right, blah, blah, blah. She releases her daughter's arms in a crowd full of strangers and runs after her mother to soothe her mother's temper tantrum. After her mother had just emotionally and psychologically assaulted her daughter, she left her daughter standing there to go soothe her mother. So what the daughter sees is, oh, grandma, whatever you want to call it, she must be really important, and I must not be. And what she says goes. Like, my mom just left me to soothe my abuser. And to the child, she's probably not thinking really much about that, but in her subconscious, she's going to know, oh, grandma, whatever, is really important. What she says goes. We have to listen to her so this doesn't happen. But then when that grandmother literally is insisting on like her daughter soothing her emotions instead of her daughter soothing her daughter's emotions, she's torn. And this mother probably thinks, I'm going to go in the car, I'm going to tell her this isn't right, and that's going to be enough to just have the contrast and say, Grammy's like this, we accept her for her, but it's not right that she's like this. And then we teach our daughters to accept abuse on behalf of the person that we have defeatedly learned we had to accept abuse from. And some people can look at me or look at the situation and say, oh, that woman, you know, she's grateful to have, she should be grateful to have a mother who goes on vacations with her, she should, blah, blah, blah. But you could tell that this was a long systemic journey that these people were on. And you could tell that the daughter was used to it, the mother was used to it, and the grandmother was insistent upon it staying the way that it was. So when my daughter was 15, I'm sure I've said this in some of my YouTube videos before, she said one of the most profound things to me I've ever heard anybody say, let alone a 15-year-old child. She said to me, Mom, you were always looking at your mother, telling me who not to be, like, don't be like her. And this was the fundamental flaw of staying in the system like this that I didn't realize, because I used to think as long as I give them a contrast, they'll know how to deal with healthy people and insane people. Well, I just taught them that insane people were closer to healthy than I think I should have. So she said, you were always looking at your mom, telling me like not to be like her. And guess what? When you were standing there holding my hand, looking at her instead of me, I was looking at what you were looking at. And then I identified with her. And I saw this whole scene play out like in my physical body when I saw this little girl standing there frozen when her mom had just left her to go soothe her own mother. And then the mom came back after she soothed her mother, and her mom finally stomped her feet, stood there disgruntled, like threw her bags down, waiting for them to get their way. Like, how dare this 10-year-old enjoy her day when this grandmother's enraged and disgruntled. And the mom comes over to try to pick up her daughter, and her daughter's a block of ice. She won't move. And the mom, you could tell, is like, she's like shaking. You could tell that she's like trying to warm her, like, please, just like, I'm sorry that happened. Like, let's enjoy our day. So the mom is torn with this emotional battlefield between two tantruming people, except one's a 70-year-old woman and one's a 10-year-old girl. And the mom was trying to warm both of them, which is a lot of energy. But the girl learns, well, my mom's probably like, as cool as it is, she's weak, right? As cool as it is that she's like able to do that for both of us, the girl never gets to feel important. The grandmother's obviously more important. The girl gets to feel the scraps of importance when her mom advocates for her. But her mom left her in a space of trauma to go soothe the abuser. It's obvious that that girl had this like, Grammy's more important than me thing going on, even though I know that that wasn't true for the mother. I know that to the mother, she thought the only way to get through this is to do what I've always done, which is placate my mother, and then finally we can move on. But I can't move on with my life until I placate my mother. That is somebody who will not be able to go estranged from their mother until their mother steals their child or tells their child, oh, your mom's a piece of shit, she doesn't do anything. Look, I paid for you to come to this amusement park. I paid for you to do all these things. Your mother didn't do anything. And again, glorifies herself and makes her more important even than her own daughter, so that her granddaughter, again, sticks to the cult-like family system of the center point of the most dysfunctional person and pledges allegiance to that dysfunction. So when I saw this, and I hope you can understand the ripping apart that this 45-year-old woman was experiencing. I could see it. Like, I wanted to hug her. And I could see that she doesn't see it. She's like I was. Like, oh, you know, as long as I tell her that's not normal, as long as I say you didn't deserve that, that's going to be fine. But talking is not going to override the bodily experience that this girl had. And the awareness that like her mother's going to leave her to go soothe her grandmother at all costs. So that must make her grandmother more important than her daughter. So it made me feel like, oh, this is what my daughter was talking about. Like, you were looking at her and saying, don't be like that. But the whole time you were chasing her, which is so ironic because both of them, like my mother, her mother, they're so overreaching. But if you stay in a dynamic like that, this woman I could see was still uplifting her own energy to try to reach to her unreachable mother who always was overreaching in her life. And then there's her daughter, and this is how cults stay cults in narcissistic family systems, trying to reach up to her mother by aligning essentially with the grandmother. That's what will happen eventually. It's like, if I have to reach up to my mother, but my mother's reaching up to my grandmother, who's always overreaching, but we're never touching, then there's never any connection. And there's always this, I am uplifting my own body to step out of my reality to reach somebody who seems important, but they won't make me important. So everybody's elevated in some weird fantasy that's dysfunctional as fuck. And there's no connection on the ground there. So you could see this woman, she was no different than her 10-year-old child in her mind, reaching out to soothe her mother, right? She gave her daughter the gift, though, of going, you don't have to do that for me. I just have to do that for my mother, because that's just the way it is. So if her daughter grows up and says, well, I'm not going to deal with that shit because you dealt with it from your mother, so now I just don't like you because I'm a teenager. And that girl that 10-year-old girl, I'm not saying this is obviously like going to happen, but that 10-year-old girl might say, you know what, Mom? You pissed me off, so I'm just not going to talk to you. Because the 10-year-old girl wasn't made to feel responsible for her mother. She wasn't chasing after her mother going, Mommy, oh, I'm sorry that I did this for Grammy. Oh, I can't believe I made a mess of this. She stood there and was like, I'm not moving. And I can't believe either of you. My guess is that's because her mother doesn't poison her all day, every day, right? So her level of toxic load is much less. And people who are cleaner in that way, who aren't made to feel responsible for their parents, would probably find it a lot easier to say, yeah, I don't need you, because they were given the gift of being able to initiate in the world, of being able to stay in their own agency, even if it's disagreed with how they're being self-agent. They're given a gift of being able to be in the world as themselves, and they believe in themselves in the world. That is a gift they were given by their parent, who they might now be saying, I am annoyed, so I'm estranged from you. I don't want you in my life. But then there's the polar end of this, which is if you're in a truly toxic narcissistic family system and you're really trauma bonded, estrangement is the last choice that you would make. You will only make it when there's no other choice to make, because trauma bonding makes you feel so responsible for that person and to make that person happy, because it's never an attainable happiness. And they hook you into that shared fantasy of your job, your duty is to pledge allegiance to me, period. At all costs, I have to be right. I have to get my way. And if you get your way, I'm going to shame you, be mad at you. I'm going to find a way to undercut you and make it miserable for you that you got away with getting your way. So people from really toxic situations who have to choose estrangement, it's ironic that that's really probably the last thing that they would ever be able to choose. So my response to this, what is your response? Yes, I'm drinking chicken broth. That's what this is. Oh, mate, I didn't have to say that. It kind of looks like coffee. My response to this is, if we are given the gift of self-agency, and I am sandwiched between this because for me, I don't need to go into the whole story about it, but I got a call after my mother has done everything in my entire life, besides my own experience of physical abuse and neglect, and in every kind of way, the target on my back, the shaming constantly, the cutting my hair so I look like a boy because I don't want to brush my hair because I'm not a neurotypical person as a child. There's so many things that I could talk about from my own experience. But And, you know, I could say, as the mother sandwiched in between this, my mother used to say things to my son, like, oh, I'll give you $50 if you lose 10 pounds in a summer, right? My one daughter came home and she said, after 30 days of not seeing my mother, after being with her for 2 hours, did you know Grammy's the only one who feeds me? Like, she literally can get her claws in like that. And that's what the intention is to do. And I used to think, oh, I can psychologically combat that because my kids would obviously see it's not true. Like 30 days, don't you think you'd be starving if she was the only person who fed you? But no, psychology and programming are very real. And to a fragile brain, it is scary. It is scary what can happen. And that's what grooming is. That's what grooming is. In those 2 minutes away from your parents, to just insert that little, hey, I'm safe. They're not. Hey, come over here, sit on my lap. Oh. So when I realized that my children were being enrolled, I knew that, but I thought I would be able to offset that with reality. But that's not the case. So when I got a call from my mother telling me that my 17-year-old daughter, who didn't tell me anything like this, was not coming home and she's going to be living with my mother. Normal people could go, oh, well, like from a normal family system, oh, well, that's a great grandmother helping out. Like the kid, obviously you were a shitty parent, blah, blah, blah. That's not what this is. That is not what this is. If it was, I would take responsibility for that. So when I got this call and I realized that this isn't just about enrolling my children, and trying to take them away from me with the face of like, look, I'm helping. Like the storyline was, oh, I can't let my granddaughter be on the streets as a homeless person while her room is white upstairs waiting for her, right? So when I get this call, and it's been a year since then, so, you know, my daughters and I are not estranged, but she did leave, and that was it for me with my own mother. Like, I called the cops. They wouldn't do anything because she was 17. And by the time they would, she would have been 18, blah, blah, blah. But when the cops went to my mother's house and she did not send my daughter home, and this was like a couple weeks later, she won, right? She won her battle. But the only way for me to actually win the war that I was in my entire life was for me to step out of it. Like, I do not have a choice because I also have other children. And so for me, my perspective of like watching this play out is that the fact that people feel like they have a choice so young, like it took me 40 years of being abused with a target on my back in my family system to say, it's one thing to fuck with me. It's a whole different ball game. You fuck with my kids. Like, I am much more of a mama bear than a bear. And I don't feel like I had a choice to protect my other kids. And for me, I think psychological distance would have been great. I could have lived in that dynamic my whole life, but she took it way too far. So for me, as the sandwiched person, and this is what I want mothers to hear for themselves. If you really are having a daughter or a child who's like in a season of life where maybe they're presenting as borderline, and which would make a lot of sense in my family system right now. Narcissistic abuse creates that. And that is exactly what's going on here and not from me. So if you have a child who's in that season of life and they said, you know what, I'm out. I want you to understand, and the way that I experienced this even from my own daughter, as much as it hurt me, as much as I felt locked behind doors and then locked out, just like I was most of my life, and I wanted to go codependently save her from what she didn't know she was in, I understand that I gave her the gift of self-agency and an allegiance to herself. And I'm not saying that's the best either. Maybe an allegiance to her own faith in herself is the more important thing to say. I gave her the gift of initiation in the world, of believing that she would still have a mother if she chose things that were against me, of knowing she's going to be loved no matter what, of first and foremost, not feeling responsible for me, not abusing her to the point where she's doing everything for 40 years just to figure out how to make it stop, right? So if you're a mother who is estranged from a child, and I would never want to do this because I know the tables turn. This is why I would have never cut my mother off if she didn't fuck with my children, because I know tables always turn. And I wouldn't want to be a mother who's cut off from her children, but I also wouldn't want to be a mother who demonizes and just completely drowns her children all the time, right? But I do know that it was my daughter's agency that made me go, oh, all right, we can do this actually. And she did it first. My daughter gave me the gift, actually, that I gave her in her whole childhood. And for me, that was a necessary gift. My estrangement is not because my mother didn't appreciate how I wrote or played the piano or something. My estrangement is after 40 years of literally having a target on my back and going wait, I'm getting healthier, I'm getting cleaner. And I will not tolerate the incessant pecking to make me the devil, because I'm not that. And it's disgusting that I swallowed those projections for 40 years and believed that's what I was. So I do want to say that if you have a parent that you feel confident to be estranged from, it's because they gave you the gift of not feeling responsible for them. And that's awesome. That's awesome that you don't have to feel responsible for your parents. But those of us who probably should practice estrangement, it's very hard to do so because we weren't given that gift. We feel very responsible. So that's my feedback on the article that I read in the New Yorker. I hope it's in some way helpful for you. If it is, let me know how. And if you read the article, give me your feedback. Yeah, there's that. Have a great day.